No one notices the man who empties your trash, but sometimes the quietest people are carrying the biggest secrets. What if the cleaner you ignored every day was actually the heir to a $1 billion empire, and the only thing he wanted was real love? The elevator doors of Halstead Global slid open every morning at exactly 6:10 a.m., and Daniel Halstead stepped out with a mop in one hand and a plastic bucket in the other. His uniform was gray, slightly faded at the elbows, with a stitched name tag that read Dan, no last name. Just Dan. That was intentional. In a building where names opened doors and money bent rules, Daniel wanted to be invisible. And most days he succeeded. Halstead Global was one of the most powerful corporations in the country, a glass and steel monument to wealth, control, and ambition. At the top sat Richard Halstead, the billionaire founder, Daniel's father. Newspapers called Richard ruthless, brilliant, and untouchable. Employees whispered about him like he was a myth rather than a man. No one knew that his only son was pushing a cleaning cart down the same hallways where executives discussed million-dollar deals. Daniel stopped near the conference rooms, quietly wiping fingerprints from glass walls. Inside, men in tailored suits laughed over coffee, their watches worth more than Daniel's monthly salary. He caught fragments of conversation, stock prices, mergers, weekend trips to places Daniel had only seen in magazines. No one looked at him. And that was the point. He remembered the night that led him here. "You don't know if they love you or your money," Daniel had said, standing in his father's penthouse office, city lights glowing behind him. Richard Halstead had studied his son with a tired expression. "That's the price of power." "I don't want that price," Daniel replied. "I want someone who chooses me, not the name." His father had laughed then, a short, disbelieving sound. "And how do you plan to find that? Hide who you are." Daniel had met his father's eyes without hesitation. Yes. Richard had refused at first, then argued, then finally sighed, rubbing his temples. "1 year," he said. "You work under me. If you come back disappointed, you stop this nonsense." That was how Daniel became Dan the cleaner. By 8:30 a.m., the building was alive. He moved carefully now, avoiding collisions with rushing employees. Some treated him like furniture. Others treated him worse. "Hey, mop guy," a sharp voice snapped one morning. "You missed a spot." Daniel turned to see a young executive pointing at an already clean floor. Daniel nodded politely. "I'll take care of it." The man smirked. "That's what I thought." Humiliation had a sound. It was the echo of laughter behind your back, the pause when people realized you weren't important enough to acknowledge. Daniel learned to swallow it. Every day, during lunch breaks, he sat alone in the service stairwell, eating simple meals he packed himself. Once he overheard 2 women from marketing talking nearby. "I could never date someone like that," one said, glancing in Daniel's direction. "No ambition." The other laughed. "Please. I'm not falling in love with a mop." Daniel stared at his sandwich until he lost his appetite. It wasn't just women. Men dismissed him, mocked him, or acted like he didn't exist. And yet, beneath the quiet suffering, Daniel felt something unexpected: clarity. For the first time in his life, people reacted to who they thought he was, not what he had. Then one afternoon, something changed. He was cleaning the break room on the 14th floor when he heard a soft voice behind him. "You don't have to redo it. It's already clean." Daniel turned. A woman stood there holding a coffee mug, her expression gentle but firm. She wore simple office clothes, nothing flashy, but there was a calm confidence in the way she stood. Daniel began. "You're doing your job well," she said, smiling. "I see you here every day." That caught him off guard. "You do?" She nodded. "I'm Emma." "Dan," he replied automatically. She extended her hand. He hesitated, then shook it, aware of the roughness of his palms compared to her smooth skin. She didn't pull away. From that day on, Emma started noticing him. She said hello. She asked how his day was going. Small things, but in a building that treated Daniel like air, her kindness felt like oxygen. One evening, as he wiped down desks long after most employees had gone home, Emma stayed behind, working late. The office was quiet except for the hum of computers. "You ever get tired?" she asked suddenly. Daniel paused. "Sometimes." She smiled sadly. "Me too." People think office jobs are easy. They don't see the pressure. He laughed softly. People don't see a lot of things. She studied him for a moment, as if sensing there was more behind his words. "You're different from the others," she said. "How so?" "You listen," Emma replied. "Most people here talk like they're afraid of silence." Daniel felt something stir in his chest. No one had described him like that before. Days turned into weeks. Their conversations grew longer, deeper. Emma told him about her childhood in a small town, about her dreams of doing something meaningful instead of just climbing corporate ladders. Daniel spoke carefully, hiding details but sharing his values: honesty, respect, simplicity. He never mentioned wealth, never hinted at power. And for the first time, someone liked him without conditions. But love, Daniel would soon learn, is never safe from the truth. The next time Emma laughed at one of Daniel's quiet jokes, he felt it deep in his chest, like something fragile waking up after a long sleep. It scared him more than the insults ever had. Being invisible was painful, but being seen, truly seen, meant there was something real he could lose. Their routine slowly became a comfort neither of them admitted they needed. Daniel learned that Emma arrived early every Wednesday because the elevators were quieter then, and she liked the calm. Emma noticed that Daniel always cleaned her floor last, not because it was required, but because he worked more carefully when he was tired. She said it told her something about his character. One evening, as rain hammered against the tall windows of Halstead Global, Emma found Daniel sitting in the stairwell again, staring at nothing. His dinner sat untouched beside him. "You didn't eat," she said softly, sitting a step below him without asking. "I wasn't hungry," he replied, though his stomach betrayed him with a low sound. She smiled gently and broke her sandwich in half, offering it to him. "Then share mine." Daniel hesitated. In his other life, people offered him five-star meals without blinking. This small, uneven sandwich felt more meaningful than all of it. He accepted. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said after a moment. "Of course." "Why this job?" she asked. "You're smart. Anyone can tell. You don't belong where people treat you like you're nothing." Daniel swallowed. The truth burned behind his teeth. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "you learn more about people when they think you have no value." Emma nodded slowly. "That makes sense." But her eyes told him she knew there was more. Their connection didn't go unnoticed. Whispers followed them down hallways. One afternoon, a group of coworkers passed Daniel as he scrubbed the floor near Emma's desk. "Is she really talking to the cleaner now?" one woman scoffed. "Guess she couldn't land a real man," another laughed. Emma heard them. Her jaw tightened. She stood up and walked straight toward them. "Say it again," she said calmly. The women froze. "We didn't." "You don't get to decide someone's worth by their job," Emma continued, her voice steady but sharp. "And you definitely don't get to insult me for having basic decency." They walked away, embarrassed. Daniel stared at her, stunned. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Emma replied. "Silence is how people like that win." That night, Daniel lay awake in his modest apartment, another deliberate choice, far from luxury, wondering if his father had ever defended anyone without power. He doubted it. Days later, Emma asked him to walk with her after work. "Just around the block," she said. Nothing formal. Daniel changed out of his uniform, heart pounding. They walked beneath streetlights, the city alive around them. "I know this might sound strange," Emma said, stopping near a small cafe, "but I feel like I can be myself around you. No pretending. No pressure." Daniel's chest tightened. "Me too." She smiled, then hesitated. "But there's something I need to know. Are you hiding from something?" He looked away. Lying felt heavier now, but telling the truth felt impossible. "I'm just trying to figure out who I am," he said. Emma studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay." That night, they shared their first kiss. Soft, uncertain, real. Daniel tasted happiness unfiltered by wealth or fear. And for a brief moment, he forgot about the secret waiting to destroy it. The next morning, everything changed. A black luxury car pulled up outside Halstead Global. Executives straightened. Assistants whispered. The building buzzed with tension. Richard Halstead had arrived unannounced. Daniel froze in the hallway, mop in hand, as his father stepped inside, commanding attention without saying a word. Richard's eyes scanned the room and landed on Daniel. For a split second, the billionaire's expression flickered. Shock. Anger. Something like pride. "Daniel," Richard said aloud. The room went silent. Emma turned slowly. Confusion etched across her face. "Daniel?" Richard smiled coldly. "Or should I say my son?" The mop clattered to the floor. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones appeared. Whispers exploded. Emma stared at Daniel like she was seeing a stranger. "Your son," she repeated. Daniel's heart pounded. "Emma, I can explain." But she stepped back, hurt flashing across her face. "You're the billionaire's son?" Richard placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "This little experiment is over." Emma's eyes filled with tears, not of awe, but betrayal. "You lied to me," she whispered. "No," Daniel said desperately. "I hid something. There's a difference." She shook her head. "I trusted you." And she walked away. Daniel watched her disappear into the crowd, knowing that for the first time in his life, all the money in the world couldn't fix what he had broken. The building felt different after Emma walked away. The same polished floors, the same glass walls, the same people. But for Daniel, everything had lost its color. The silence around him wasn't the comfortable invisibility he had chosen. It was heavy, suffocating, filled with judgment and curiosity. Whispers followed him everywhere now. That was the cleaner? He's the boss's son? So, it was all an act. Daniel stood in the executive elevator for the first time in months, his reflection staring back at him in the mirrored walls. Without the uniform, without the mop, he looked like what everyone expected him to be. Well-dressed, confident, powerful. And he hated it. His father stood beside him, arms crossed. "You made a spectacle," Richard said quietly as the elevator rose. "I tried to live honestly," Daniel replied. Richard scoffed. "By lying?" "By removing the money," Daniel said firmly. "By seeing who people really are." Richard turned to him. "And what did you find?" Daniel thought of Emma's smile, her kindness, her trust. "I found someone real," he said. "And I lost her." The elevator doors opened to the executive floor. Daniel walked into a world that had always been waiting for him. People smiled too quickly. Compliments flowed easily. Invitations were extended without hesitation. It made him sick. Emma didn't come to work the next day. Or the next. Daniel asked around, but no one knew or cared. To them, she was just another employee. Replaceable. On the third day, he found her desk empty. Her mug gone. Her photos removed. He went to human resources. "Where is Emma Collins?" he demanded. "She requested leave," the manager replied stiffly. "Indefinite." Daniel nodded, then left without another word. That night, he went to the small cafe where they had walked together. He sat at the same table by the window, hoping, praying, she might appear. She didn't. For the first time, Daniel felt truly poor. Meanwhile, Emma sat in her tiny apartment, staring at her phone, replaying every conversation they had ever shared. Every laugh, every quiet moment. "He looked at me like I mattered," she whispered to herself. Was that fake too? Her friend Sarah tried to comfort her. "Maybe he was just bored," Sarah said gently. "Rich men do strange things." Emma shook her head. "No. That's what scares me. I don't think he was pretending with me." Days passed. Daniel sent messages Emma never answered. Not apologies. Not explanations. Just honesty. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you. You mattered before you knew who I was." Finally, she replied with 3 words. "I need space." Richard noticed the change in his son. Daniel attended meetings, but spoke little. He refused perks. He rejected luxury. One evening, Richard confronted him in the penthouse. "You're sabotaging yourself over a woman who couldn't handle the truth." Daniel met his father's gaze. "She didn't fall in love with the truth you value." "And what truth is that?" "That power is everything," Daniel said. "She fell in love with kindness." Richard was silent. Weeks later, Halstead Global announced a major charity initiative, publicly. Praised, privately strategic. Richard wanted Daniel to lead it. "You'll look compassionate," Richard said. "It'll help your image." Daniel agreed, but on one condition. "I want to visit the lower floors again. As myself." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because that's where I belong right now." On his first day back, Daniel walked the halls without an entourage. People stared. Some avoided him. Others bowed their heads. He stopped near the break room and saw Emma. She stood there, holding a box of files, her face pale when she saw him. "Emma," he said softly. She stiffened. "You shouldn't be here." "I work here," Daniel replied. "Just like you." She laughed bitterly. "No. You own the ground I stand on." "That's not true," he said. "I never asked for that." "But you benefited from it," she said. "And you hid it." Daniel took a breath. "I hid my name, not my heart." Her eyes wavered. "I don't need forgiveness," he continued. "I just need you to know that every word I said to you is real." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Emma spoke. "You don't understand what it's like to fall for someone you think is safe, and then realize they're untouchable." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then let me come down to where you are." She looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time since the truth came out, she didn't walk away. Emma didn't say yes. She didn't say no either. She simply stood there, gripping the box of files a little tighter, as if it were the only solid thing left in a world that suddenly felt unstable. "Coming down isn't as simple as you think," she said quietly. "I know," Daniel replied. "That's why I'm asking, not assuming." She studied his face, searching for the arrogance she expected to find. It wasn't there. What she saw instead was exhaustion and fear. "I can't be part of a fairy tale where you get bored and disappear back into luxury," Emma said. "I won't survive that." Daniel swallowed. "Then don't be part of a fairy tale. Be part of something real." She didn't answer. She walked past him, leaving him standing alone in the hallway again, except this time, he wasn't invisible. The next weeks tested Daniel more than any humiliation he'd faced as a cleaner. Word spread fast that the billionaire's son was refusing special treatment. He ate in the common cafeteria. He declined the private elevator. He showed up unannounced on lower floors, listening more than talking. Executives whispered that he was weak. Some laughed behind closed doors. Others warned Richard. "You're letting him embarrass the company," one board member said. Richard listened, expression unreadable. For the first time, he didn't intervene. Daniel, meanwhile, made a quiet decision. He resigned from his executive track position. The announcement stunned the company. Instead of a corner office, Daniel requested a mid-level role in operations. No authority over hiring or firing, no special salary. Just responsibility. Emma heard about it from Sarah. "He's serious," Sarah said. "People are furious." Emma said nothing, but that night, she cried into her pillow, not from anger, but from confusion. Why would someone with everything choose less? Their paths crossed again during a late-night project. The office was nearly empty, lights dimmed. Emma struggled with a data issue, frustration building. "Your formula's correct," Daniel said gently from behind her. "The source file is outdated." She turned, startled. "You didn't have to help." "I wanted to." She hesitated, then stepped aside. He showed her quietly, patiently, without condescension. It felt painfully familiar. When they finished, neither moved. "Why are you doing this?" Emma finally asked. "Why give up power?" Daniel leaned against the desk. "Because power didn't make me happy. You did." She looked away. "That's not fair." "I know," he said. "But it's true." Emma took a shaky breath. "You don't understand the pressure. Every time someone looks at me now, I wonder if they think I'm climbing my way up through you." "That won't happen," Daniel said firmly. "I'll make sure of it."
How?
"I'll step away if I have to." That stopped her cold. "Don't say things you don't mean." "I mean it," he replied. "Love shouldn't cost you your dignity." For the first time, Emma reached for his hand. Just briefly. Just enough. But the world didn't pause for their fragile hope. A major scandal broke weeks later. An internal report leaked to the media, accusing Halstead Global of exploiting lower-level workers. Protesters gathered outside the building. Stock prices dipped. The board panicked. And someone needed to take control. Richard called Daniel to his office. "This company is bleeding," Richard said. "I need you." Daniel looked out at the city skyline. "You don't need me," he said. "You need accountability." Richard slammed his hand on the desk. "This is not the time for ideals." "It's the only time for them," Daniel replied. Richard stared at his son, truly seeing him for the first time. "If you choose this path," he warned, "you may lose everything." Daniel thought of the mop, the insults, Emma's kindness. "Then I'll finally know what everything is worth." The board meeting that followed shocked everyone. Daniel stood before them, not as heir, not as cleaner, but as a man. He exposed internal practices, accepted responsibility, and proposed reforms that would cost millions. "This isn't charity," he said. "It's justice." Silence filled the room. Outside, Emma watched the live feed on her phone, tears streaming down her face. She realized then that the man she fell in love with had never changed. Only the world around him had. The room held its breath as Daniel finished speaking. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked furious. Others looked ashamed. No one interrupted him, because for the first time in the history of Halstead Global, someone had spoken not from fear or greed, but from conscience. Richard Halstead slowly stood. For decades, people had watched him dominate rooms like this, bend outcomes with a single look. Now, his voice was quieter than anyone expected. "My son is right," Richard said. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. "We built this company on strength," Richard continued, "but somewhere along the way, we confused strength with control. If Halstead Global survives this, it will be because we change. The decision that followed was not unanimous, but it was enough. Reforms were approved. Independent audits launched. The stock fell further before it began to recover. Headlines called it risky. Critics called it foolish. Daniel called it necessary. He didn't celebrate. He went home alone that night, sat on the edge of his bed, and waited. Not for approval, not for wealth, for one message. It came just after midnight. "Emma, can we talk?" They met at the small cafe, the same one where everything had begun. No security, no luxury car, just two people sitting across from each other. "I watched the meeting," Emma said quietly. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Daniel replied. "Because I couldn't ask you to trust me while hiding behind power." She looked at him for a long time. "You scared me." "I know. You still scare me," she admitted. "But not because of your money. Because of what you're willing to lose." Daniel nodded. "I don't want a woman who loves me despite who I am. I want someone who loves me because of who I choose to be." Tears filled Emma's eyes. "I fell in love with the man who cleaned floors and listened to me, not the billionaire everyone fears." Daniel reached across the table, his voice steady. "Then choose him." She stood suddenly, walked around the table, and hugged him, tight, real, unafraid. "I already did," she whispered. Months passed. Halstead Global transformed slowly, imperfectly, but sincerely. Worker conditions improved. Voices were heard. For the first time, cleaners were thanked by name. Daniel declined the title of CEO. He chose a leadership role that kept him close to people, not above them. Sometimes he still wore a simple uniform when helping late at night, not to hide but to remember. Emma moved into a small apartment with him. They argued. They laughed. They struggled like any couple. There were no fairy tales, just trust, rebuilt daily. One evening, Emma found Daniel cleaning the kitchen floor. "You don't have to do that," she teased. He smiled. "I know. I just like knowing where I came from." She knelt beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Then stay here, with me." He kissed her forehead. "Always." Years later, a young intern once asked Emma, "Is it true you dated the billionaire's son before anyone knew?" Emma smiled. "No," she said. "I fell in love with a cleaner who had the courage to be himself." And that was the truth. Because real love doesn't recognize titles. It recognizes hearts. Before you go, take a moment and think about this. How many people do we walk past every day without truly seeing them? How often do we judge someone's worth by their clothes, their job, or their status, without ever knowing the heart they carry inside? Daniel proved something powerful, that real love doesn't come from money, names, or power. It comes from humility, honesty, and the courage to be yourself, even when the world misunderstands you. Emma didn't fall in love with a billionaire. She fell in love with a man who listened, who respected others, and who chose kindness when he could have chosen comfort. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who believes in true love, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional, real-life inspired stories. Because sometimes the greatest riches aren't found in bank accounts, but in the people who love us for who we truly are. Blue Heart.